Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television is sponsored by Nutrien. Nutrien, feeding the future.
Hello everyone and welcome to Perspective. This is a public affairs presentation of Florida Gateway College. My name is Mike McKee and my guests on the program today represent emergency management and health. I've got Shane Morgan, the Director of Emergency Management for Columbia County, and Tom Moffisis, who is the Director of the Columbia County Public Health Department. We'll talk to them about disasters, all kinds of disasters, and how they are prepared for it when we come back. Don't go away.
Disaster tips from the objects left behind.
My home wasn't insured, but you can check your insurance policy now to make sure you're covered. Oh.
My savings are lost, but you can put money aside and plan for unexpected disaster costs.
We're lost forever, but you can scan important documents now so they survive.
For more tips on how to prepare, visit ready.gov.
Welcome back to Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television, and also I'd like to welcome the listeners on WQHL and WCJX to our program. Shane Morgan is the Emergency Management Director for Columbia County, has been in that role for many, many years. They call you Disaster Shane.
Disaster Dude on the United Way Board.
Yes, he's on the United Way Board as well, as known as the Disaster Dude because of the recovery that takes place many times after disasters. And Tom Moffisis is the Director of the Health Department, who is in partnership with Emergency Management because what they do intertwines so much, and it's good to have both of you here today.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for having us, and that's one of the things that I really want us to talk about are what we do in emergency management, because it's not something that people are really aware of, what the role is for EM and how it plays in with the other departments and agencies that are affiliated with the county and the state.
Well, and you know, I don't think a lot of people, I think a lot of people think all you do is when there's an emergency.
Right.
But they don't understand that we meet quite frequently. I'm on your emergency committee as well, and we meet at least quarterly to talk about what needs to be, how the word needs to get out. So what are some of the challenges that you in emergency management have? And I think communication is the biggest one.
Communication is the biggest one by far, because number one, after any event, any exercise, we will do what's called an after-action report, and we'll go over what the good, the bad, and the ugly were, focusing more on the bad and the ugly. That way we can figure out where we need to improve policies and procedures and those kind of things. The number one thing that comes out is always communication. It could be communication as in talking radio to radio between responders, between agency to agency, and those type of things. So communication encompasses a broad range of definitions, and it's something that we're constantly focused on. Our communication with the public is another area that we always try to focus on and improve on, because that's very important, getting our message out to the public at large so they know what's happening.
Now, I know that we recently had a speaker from the Ham Radio Operators Association in Lake City, and he brought up some really good points that when the power's out, radios are out.
Right.
And I know that a lot of people don't realize is there are towers that have what they call repeaters on the towers. And so that repeats the signal so it can get even further down, like to the south end of the county. And when those towers are out of power, there's no way to get, and so what you've done is you've partnered with the ham radio operators to fix that problem.
They're a very key part of it, because what they do is more than invaluable. It is a necessary component of our response, because what we can do is we have a setup in our building for a base station and everything where we can have one of the ham operators there, and then other ham operators can go out to different places, whether it's an open shelter, whether it's a hospital, if hospital communications are down, whatever vital infrastructure we have where we need them to go, we can put them out there so that they can talk to themselves and give us a good situational awareness of what's happening.
And you mentioned hospitals. That's very important, that when you've got a disaster, whether it's a hurricane, a tornado, a fire, a spill of some kind, the hospitals have to be able to take the triage people and see if there's availability of space. And so when there's no power, it's kind of hard to find out whether Lakeshore Hospital or Lake City Medical Center or the VA can accommodate.
That's absolutely right, because we always hope that generators are in place, fueled up, and ready to go to kind of get around those temporary power issues, because hopefully the power will return to those critical facilities sooner rather than later. But that's always an issue that we have, and that's where Tom and the health department come in as part of our partnership. They work in our Emergency Operations Center, our EOC, as an emergency support function, and so they can reach out to the hospitals, find out what the needs are. They also handle our special needs program. They keep in touch with the special needs shelter, making sure everything is going fine there. And so partnerships are a big part of what emergency management does and what we're all about, as well as getting resources.
So Tom, when you guys don't take the day off when the health department just gears up, because you have to be prepared for any emergency that happens, whether it's someone not having their insulin, or whether there's something, an oxygen tank so there's bound to be something that happens that people require medical attention. And if the hospitals can't take them, then the health department does what they can.
Well, it is one of the things you were talking about earlier is being prepared, and you talked about hurricane season or a disaster, and you know the hurricane season or disaster is really just the final product. It's think of it as going to school. That's the test. You know, everything that we're doing all year long is preparation. We don't take a day off. We're in the middle of running exercises. We're evaluating our operations all the time. We work with the emergency management team, running exercises to find out where we have areas that we need to grow, areas we need to expand on, and be prepared for the community. And Mike, you bring up a point. What are we going to do to help in the event of situations like that? You know, as an example, last year we were able to go back and put a generator in at the health department that'll power the entire facility. So if we are out of power, just like the other facilities, you've got the hospitals that have generator power, the health department now has generator power, so that we are up and operational to make sure that we're providing all the support emergency management needs to provide the community.
You know, Shane, I'll never forget the phone call I got from Shane. This has been probably 6 or 7 years ago. He said, "We'd like to have a disaster drill on your campus."
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, what exactly does that mean?
Right.
And so you brought in a third party from Tallahassee.
Correct.
Talk about what we did out here, because it was a chemical spill.
There was a chemical spill in that component, and we had a vendor that helped us design the exercise that we put together. We brought out, the sheriff's office was here, county and city fire departments were here, law enforcement was here, the health department was here. Tom wasn't there at that time, but we did have the health department presence. And there's a lot of planning that goes into whenever we do an exercise of any size, but especially one where we're doing a full scale or functional capability is what we were doing there, actually letting the responders go out and participate in a simulated scenario and testing their policies and procedures so that they could see if there's a way that they can improve on what they do. And that's a very key part of what we do year round, you know.
Well, and what this did for us here at the college is, you know, you never know what's going to happen. The scenario was the two students didn't want to take a test.
Right.
And so they mixed some chemicals that they knew would make an explosion. And the explosion happened, and then it got out of hand. I think there were a couple people got hurt. And of course, this was
simulated hurt. Let's say
right,
that,
right.
simulated hurt.
Let me just say this. It was the coldest day of the year in
Yes,
February.
it was.
I mean, when people say in Florida, what's your winter like? We say February 3rd and 4th was our winter. Well, these 2 days, I think it was in the 20s, and we were staged outside. We had the fire trucks outside. We had the EMTs outside, and we're all shivering, waiting to go on. But that gave us some really good information on how the public wanted to know.
Right.
The parents of kids that go to school out here wanted to know if their child was part of this explosion. In a real scenario, those are questions that your public information office and your emergency director have to know. Where are they going to get the information out so that people don't go crazy?
Right, because there's a lot of things, whether it's here at the college, whether it is a public school, the parents want to know where, okay, this happened at XYZ school, where can I go pick up my kid because they go to XYZ school? How can I get them? We don't want parents or guardians having a massive inflow into the school because we don't know what the situation is. The situation may not be safe for them to go in there. That's something that we always have to judge on a situation by situational awareness. And that's where our responders, their training really comes into play, is knowing, okay, is the campus safe for access for anybody? Because we may have to keep response agencies staged for a little bit until the EMS have to stage till they can come onto the campus and do what they have to do. The fire department may have to stage. If it's in the news right now, active shooters are a big topic of conversation because of how many have happened over the last decade. So is it safe for people other than response personnel to come in and do what they need to do? So that's really all part of it, us coordinating the message. You mentioned the committee that you sit on, the Public Information Committee, and that's where we have to have that unified message going through, supporting each other, being a part, making sure that the public is hearing one message and not, well, we think you need to go over to point A when you really need to be going to point C.
Well, and another part of what you guys do through that committee, through that one of the many committees that meet on EMT or emergency management, is we want to stop rumors.
Yes.
We want one voice. We want everybody to know there's one voice, and it needs to be coordinated with everybody. So the sheriff is not saying something different than the health department saying something different than, and that, again, that's difficult because when you have silos a lot of times and you got your own little silo over here, coordinating is very important for public safety as well.
And that's why we do all the stuff that we do year round, the planning, the training, because we don't need to be seeing each other for the first time when an event happens. If we're doing that at 2 in the morning on a Saturday of a holiday weekend because something bad has happened, then we've not been doing our job properly. So that's why we have these meetings, we have these trainings, we have these exercises that we do so that we know who the players are. You know, I've been doing this a long time. I've seen a lot of faces that have come and gone and changed several times over in different positions. So we always want to know who is in what position so that I'm not sending the information to somebody that doesn't even work in that department anymore. Me, I'm a county employee for the Board of County Commissioners. I have a county email address. So I might have somebody that helps me out in emergency times. Their position may change. Their email address doesn't change, but they may not need to be as involved in the response. So I have to know who those partners are, who those people are that I need to talk to when those type of events happen, and who's going to be participating with me.
We're talking with Shane Morgan, the Director of Emergency Management here in Columbia County, and Tom Moffisis, who is the Director of the County Health Department for both Columbia and Hamilton County. We'll continue our conversation with emergency management and preparedness when we come back. Don't go away.
I'm Jenny Garth, and as a mother of 3, I know kids worry about a lot of things. Getting enough food to eat shouldn't be one of them. But here in America, that is a real worry for 1 in 5 children. This is unacceptable, and something Feeding America is working to solve. Through a nationwide network of food banks, Feeding America serves virtually every community in the United States, including yours. See how you can help your community. Visit feedingamerica.org. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're Feeding America.
Saw the PSA there on Feeding America. Hope a famine isn't one of our emergencies that we have to prepare for.
You and me both, my friend.
Because that would be devastating. Shane Morgan is the Director of Emergency Management for Columbia County. Tom Moffisis is the Director of the Health Department for both Columbia and Hamilton counties. We're talking about emergency preparedness. There's a manual out.
Right.
How many times do you update the manual? Not only because people change jobs, people get promoted, their titles are changed, but what are some other things? Are you constantly learning from the exercises that you do that help you to tweak that emergency manual?
Absolutely. And when you talk about the emergency manual, we're talking about our comprehensive emergency management plan for the county, the CEMP. And it is a living document that we can update at any time. every 5 years it has to go before the state to be reviewed. And so we learn stuff then. One of the things that I had a responder ask me one time after, it may have been after the exercise that you talked about, Mike, they come up to me and they said, so everything went perfect, huh? You feel good about this, don't you? I was like, no, there's some stuff that we need to work on, need to learn from. And my philosophy is, whether it's an actual event or an exercise, if I haven't learned something or seen something we need to improve on, then it might be time for me to move on to my next challenge in life, because this field is constantly evolving, it's constantly learning, and that's the same thing with the manual. We're constantly finding things that we have to do to improve our processes throughout our county, and then moving on with our partners around locally and the state, because that's the important designation that I want to go ahead and throw out there, is that all disasters, all events, they begin at the local level. Then, if necessary, we elevate, we bring in state resources. If we get so expended that we need resources beyond that, that's when we can call in the federal resources and bring them in. But beginning and end, we're here when it starts, we're here when it ends, and we have to deal with the long-term ramifications of what happens here in Columbia County after an event has taken place.
Let's talk about the state involvement. I know that regardless of whether the governor tells you need to close, if you feel it's unsafe, and if the county administration and the county commission says this is not good, we don't want people out, the damage here is worse than that kind of overrides anything else, right?
Right, and that's all part of the process that starts early on, through conference calls, through discussions that I have over the phone and in person, because we'll use the hurricane as the example because that's the easy one, because we can see it coming. Usually days in advance, state conference calls will start happening, webinars and conference calls with National Weather Service in Jacksonville will start, and that's really where I get the meat and potatoes of how are we as Columbia County going to be impacted, is by talking to the National Weather Service office in Jacksonville. We do the webinars, and then if I still have questions, I can call them up on the phone and say, hey, this didn't quite make sense. We had an experience during Hurricane Dorian where one of the graphics they were showing, I just wasn't getting a real good feel for what the graphic was telling me, and I had to call them up and I'm like, explain this to me because I'm reading it one way. Am I reading it right? Am I reading it wrong? Please explain this to me. And they did, and they explained the proper way to read that graphic, and I'm like, okay, because that's all part of what goes into whenever I brief my assistant county manager, my county manager, or a member of the board if they call to find out what the latest information is. These are all things I'm having to take into consideration as I'm formulating my long-term plan over the next week or so, because Tom and his department, they'll be calling, asking what are your plans going to be, because he's got to report up to the state. They're asking about what will be done, what's the EOC going to do, what are we looking at, and other agencies will be calling and ask so that they can start prepping their staffing details that might be in the EOC if we activate.
How frustrating is it? I know Dorian was terribly frustrating.
Yes.
The people up north, they don't have to really worry about this as much, because when there's a snowstorm coming, that dumps the snow.
Right.
And it's moving this way. With a hurricane, you're having to plan, and you're relying on information that you're getting from different sources, but other people are relying on you.
Tom,
So
how frustrating was it during Dorian?
I'm going to tell you, when you look at what goes on, and I don't think everybody realizes how much is going on behind the scenes. Everybody here sits in those meetings, but when you have an emergency pending, there are so many different groups that are involved in public health, public support, emergency management, all the different partners, the electric companies, you start to pull out all of those folks and extrapolate out how many people are involved just in the planning and the unknown preparation that needs to take place. There's hundreds of people, if not thousands, just in this area that everybody else is tuned to, is my house going to be impacted? All of these people are tuned to, how do we work together to fix what the impact is.
Well, and you think about the hospitals and how they
they're
have
a
to prepare.
component, yeah.
You think about the Department of Transportation that then has to think about, well, is the Santa Fe River going to overflow its banks at the I-75 going over it? And so there's going to be, are we going to be impacted by the evacuations? Who's going to evacuate?
All the travel
Where are they going to?
evacuations,
Where's the
you know.
traffic coming from? Where? I mean, we all know what happened 2 years ago with, I think it was Irma.
After Irma.
Yeah.
That we had people in Columbia County that got this far and they couldn't go any further because they ran out of gas.
Right.
And so they were stranded. They had no place to go, so they were sleeping in their cars. So, and again, when I ask about your frustration level, it's frustrating when you don't know what this thing is doing.
Right.
It's one thing when you have the spaghetti model where it's all going up and you're wondering, well, which one is going to hit us? And then it's also frustrating that people are depending on you to make that decision, and you can't.
And that was the thing that during Dorian, it really, really played its head out over the couple of weeks that we watched
kept
it.
going.
It just kept going and going, and each time it was something different. And so I'm trying to formulate my plan based off what the National Weather Service is telling me. I told a friend of mine, you know, we were talking about Dorian coming, and he mentioned that, you know, the tools that the forecasters use are getting better and better. And I said, almost half jokingly, I was like, yeah, but to a certain degree, I'm starting to think that the hurricanes are getting smarter and smarter because of all the changes that they make, because no two hurricanes follow a similar path or the same path. And so it was challenging and frustrating because the plan I may have at 8 a.m. on Wednesday was completely different by the time 8 a.m. Thursday rolled around. By the time 8 a.m. Thursday rolled around, it was completely different by 8 a.m. Friday. And those were the things that I was having to work with and figure out was that, what's my plan if this thing does come towards us? Okay, it's backing off, because we never know what the shifts from update to update will be.
Well, and the other thing too is you got 67 school systems, and some of them over on the East
Holiday
Coast.
weekend.
It's holiday weekend. How are they going to get the word out? The college has 5,000 students, 200 employees. What are we going to tell them? We think it's going to be here by the weekend. We're already off on Monday. Do we close on Tuesday because it may be bad weather here? Maybe sunny. There have been times where, but you have to make a decision because you got to get information out. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. We don't just serve Columbia County.
Right.
We have 5 different counties. And we go all the way to Dixie County on the west coast of Florida, where their challenges are back roads that are dirt, that flood, that are unsafe to pass during a storm. I mean, even with the heavy rain down there, it can be challenging for our students to get out.
Well, and with Dorian, Dixie County and Taylor counties had already come off a couple weeks where the rivers had flooded.
Well, and they got rained on.
Yeah.
They got bad rain, that we didn't get, I guess.
Yeah, 29 inches of rain over a day and a half period that they got down in Dixie County, and that was before Dorian even came on the map. That was still a week or two before Dorian even formed, coming off of Africa out in the Atlantic. So there was that challenge that they were having to deal with, and that is one of the things that, especially like Florida Gateway College, having so many different branches, each one getting impacted, you have to have representatives and be in touch with those local EM offices, because I can only tell you so much based off what I'm seeing, because I focus in a silo on Columbia County, from the northern border to the southern border, east and west. I'm looking at what's happening inside our county so I can make those decisions.
Well, and the challenges are that we're an evacuation route. I mean, when you think about Highway 100 being part of that, you think of Highway 41 that some people choose, and you got both interstates that are evacuation routes. Tom, what about the challenges of people that are coming through our community, staying in our hotels as evacuees that may have some health issues that maybe you weren't aware of, and now we've got a whole group of people that are in our community that normally aren't here?
It's stuff that we look at as a staff. We have those discussions in advance, and it's an emergency. You have all the protocols in place, the plans in place. Anything that would take place, people coming in that have health issues, the public health side will work with, EMS may deal with something, the hospitals may deal with components of it. There's a whole team of folks that would rally with that. And, I wanted to go back, if I could, for just a second. I think Dorian was probably the best example for a lot of people, especially locally, that as you prepare, decisions have to be made, and you have a certain window of time that those decisions have to be made, and you have to make it on the best possible information you have at that time. And once you pull the trigger on certain aspects of an emergency like that, you don't just put it back in the box right away. And I mean, if you go back and look, there were football games that were moved that at the time, good decisions, and then a couple days later you look and go, why did this take place?
Yeah, I think Florida State moved their game from Jacksonville to Tallahassee that weekend because they didn't know what the storm was going to bring.
And then there's a bunch of backlash on why did we do this?
Economic development.
Right.
And at the time, you can't look at it like that. The people that are in charge of these situations, they have to take all the information that they have, work within the time frames of emergencies and when you're going to activate and do certain aspects of that. And I think everybody did a great job, and we were very blessed not to have the major impact.
Well, and I think with the general public, and I think the takeaway for the general public in all of our emergencies and during hurricane season is that they need to be aware that you're just not making the decisions without some knowledge. And I think some people criticize a decision that's made because, it was sunny. We didn't have to be off that day. It was sunny.
And that's what I'm trying to address.
So I think they need to have a little more patience, and they need to understand that these guys, the job that they do is extremely hard for that. Even any emergency is going to be stressful.
And it is. And one of the things that we're also always having to do, in addition to preparing for the public at large, in the days leading up to it, we're trying ahead of time to make sure our families are all safe and where they need to be, what their plan is going to be, because we don't want them in harm's way either, so that we can focus on the jobs that we have to do for the public at large, because we won't be effective if we're in the midst of a situation and we're worried about whether our parents, our brothers, our siblings, spouses, kids, whatever the case may be, whether they're going to be all right or not. This is something that we have to consider, and we have to start taking those steps a little earlier than the public at large would, because we want to have those plans situated and taken care of by the time before the storm even hits.
We're going to take our last break here on Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television and WCJX and WQHL Radio. We'll do that. We'll be right back.
1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes. That means it could be you, your favorite brother, your other brother, you, your boss, your boss's boss, you, your barber, your barber's barber.
Nice work. Thanks.
Or you, your co-pilot, your co-pilot's co-pilot. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Welcome back to Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television. Shane Morgan and Tom Offices, thank you both for being on the program.
Thank you for having
Talk
us.
about emergency management. I think hopefully we've given some information that the general public has not heard before and doesn't know about the planning that goes into these storms. If somebody wants to be involved in either working in a shelter as a volunteer during an incident, or you have an emergency operations center that is activated,
right?
If they would like to answer phones or volunteer to go get food or whatever, would you suggest they call the United Way?
They can call the United Way, get in touch with them. My number's on the screen. They can get in touch with me, and I can refer them to the proper person over at United Way. It's an ongoing effort. We're always looking for volunteer help, especially as much as sheltering's become an issue the last few years. We need volunteers to help us out in those shelters.
All right. Thank you both again for being on the program, and thank you for watching Perspective here on FGC TV. Till next time, I'm Mike McKee. So long.